I get into this stuff particularly, which these slides are always going to be up on Blackboard. In fact, I think all semester long are already here. And I don't know, anybody used Microsoft Sway before? It's like PowerPoint, but good. Because what I like about it is it optimizes to whatever device you're on. So if you go into Blackboard and you look at it on your phone, everything fits. You usually can put it on the screen unless this thing breaks. But feel free to look at it on your phone, and you'll have access to those when you're at home looking at the recording as well on your Thursdays. So let's begin. And as I'm going through this stuff, feel free to interrupt me at any time. I'm a firm believer in that there are no stupid questions, only stupid people. So, what's philosophy? What do you think it is? I know some of you had philosophy classes. Anybody had a philosophy class before? With me or someone else? Most of you know. I know a couple of hands. So, it's one of those words that gets used where people, oh, that my philosophy on that is, and it really just means like a point of view or perspective, or it could even come down to attitude. What do you think philosophy is?
Like perceptions that people create that we base like our morals off of.
Yeah, I like that. You know, perceptions. The Germans love that. Perceptions, and also related to that, morals. Okay, I can look at that. So my philosophy on how this looks from here and what you think about this or that. Perspectives about morals, about how we ought to live. I think that's a good chunk of it. And actually, classically, that's one of the three triads of philosophy. Usually philosophy is divided into 3 parts. Theology would be what? One department of philosophy. And what that usually includes is stuff like ethics, which is another one for morals, slightly distinct, and aesthetics. Both those things have to do with value. Hey, that thing you did, that's good. That thing's pretty. Okay, those are values. That's one, and all axiology, stuff that has to do with values. That's all it is. So value philosophy, that's one realm. Another involves stuff like this. Who was the first president of the United States? Not a trick question. George Washington. Yeah, but how do you know?
History. History classes.
Okay, but how do you know you're not being lied to?
We don't.
How do we know? So the question of how do we know, that's the next realm of philosophy classically construed. Epistemology. Which is basically our theory of knowledge. How do we know what we know? So I heard someone say, history and various kinds of justifications. We can say, we know this because we have evidence for it. Why should we believe that evidence? All that stuff is part of epistemology. How we know what we know, and how we justify it. Finally, the third realm, classically understood, has to do with the nature of reality itself. So science? No. That would be too easy. Often today it is, but at least classically understood. Have you ever heard someone ask a question like what if the universe is made of cheese, man? Oh, I don't know, bro. As ridiculous as that may seem, they're getting at something there. What's the universe made out of? Whatever it is, that study is metaphysics. Alright, so while that was a ridiculous example, we have things like, what if there are other universes? Okay, sure, everything in the universe is based on atomic theory. We're comprised of atoms. But what are atoms made of? Subatomic particles. What are subatomic particles made of? Maybe strings, they vibrate in multiple dimensions. Yeah, that's in physics, but how do those things interact with metaphysics? Study of reality. But today we're this seems like the domain of science, but classically, philosophers love to talk about, no, this is the way the world is. Okay? In fact, a lot of ancient philosophy is precisely this. And Socrates really starts with this. So this is reality. Reality itself. It's not the classic threefold division. That's not all there is in philosophy. So there's other branches. Like today there's philosophy of insert whatever topic you want here. For example, my expertise is in ideology. History of philosophy, philosophy of history, those are actually two different things. Philosophy of mind, how the thoughts work, how does the mind work, stuff like that. Various kinds of religious philosophy, specialized knowledges philosophy, feminist philosophy, black philosophy, queer philosophy, and so on. Bunch of different branches. Okay? Pretty much every kind that you can think of. But these are the classical distinctions. So part of the question that we're going to constantly have is, philosophy, what is it exactly? And I'm going to tell you that philosophers aren't going to figure it out. I can say classically, we can say it's generally stuff where people are talking about this. But again, so if we're talking about, is the universe made of cheese? Are we doing philosophy? We might be. Maybe. Okay, if we're getting at reality, actually, yeah, I'd say we are. How do we know? Talking about ethics or aesthetics, you're doing philosophy. It might be bad philosophy, but you're doing it. Okay, so part of what we're going to wrestle with is, what is it exactly? How does it work? But if I think we're doing these, we're doing philosophy. Now, I just said that. There's a lot of philosophers living right now that would be infuriated with me that I just said that. But that's what it is. I think it's something very specific and very methodological. I'm not of that view. But still, defining it is a little bit difficult. We kind of know science when we see it. If I start praying to the goblins to stop it from raining, am I doing science? Probably not. Okay, it's very easy to see. I'm not doing science in that scenario. But when I'm doing philosophy, it's a little bit difficult to point out. But it's one of those things where a famous judge once said about pornography, I don't know how to define it exactly, but I know it when I see it. Okay. I think that definition is pretty good. Or lack of definition. Just saying, I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something there. In fact, what does the word mean? You got two. Philosophy. And here's where it gets even weirder. We have a Greek word here, and it's actually made of two. Philia, and that the Romans turned this into a, but for the Greeks it sounds like a P that you're whispering. Not Philia, Sophia. Let's translate right now. Philia? Love of Sophia. What does that mean? Not knowledge, not intelligence. Wisdom. Love of wisdom. I don't see it on the chart. So what does it mean? What is wisdom? So again, that's going to be probably one of the first questions on the midterm. All right, something about that. What does philosophy mean? Love of wisdom, not love of knowledge, not love of any of these other things. Love of reality. Love of wisdom. What is wisdom? Anyone want to give it a shot? Now there's a Hebraic, Abrahamic form of wisdom, which is this knowledge about things of the divine, and practical advice in the world. That's not what we're talking about. The sense of wisdom is almost a special kind of knowing. Knowing and doing all wrapped up into one. So, the word's difficult to define. Well, it means literally love of wisdom. But sometimes we're going to get into things in philosophy where you might be asking the question, how in the world is this wisdom? And that's a good question. The way that our itinerary of philosophy is going to go, and I said this in the introductory stuff too, is for the most part, I'm going to start in the ancient world and we're going to progressively work our way to the present. There are different ways to do this. I could do this topically where we talk about this subject or that subject. So we're going to look at it in a kind of historical way in here. That's going to, by nature of being a survey, is going to end up excluding a lot. Anytime where you zoom out, you're not getting a lot of depth. So, but we're going to be zooming out because this is an introductory course. But if you find something here that interests you and you want more information about it, let me know. Since we're going back so far, we're going to be doing a lot of dead people from Europe. But there are other traditions out there. For example, one of my areas of expertise is Eastern philosophy, so if that interests you. We're going to do a little bit of a survey in there. But if that interests you, next time I offer Eastern philosophy, show up for it. Or when I offer feminist philosophy, show up for it. Or Islamic philosophy, show up for it. Please. So, what we're going to do is we're going to start in ancient Greece, where they coined the word. Now, what happened in the ancient world, at least in Greece, I'm not convinced. If you took this class 20 years ago, they would tell you philosophy began in ancient Greece. 585 BC, thereabouts. I don't think so. I think there are some traditions where things are going on simultaneously in various parts of the world. And we have biases about this too. Okay? In India, China, Greece, sure. African philosophy often gets ignored because there's not a written tradition there. There's an oral tradition, and Europeans tend to be very scriptocentric. If they didn't write it down, it must not matter. And that's an Occidental tendency. But there's an African and Africana philosophy too. But what I think we can say is that what happens in the ancient world is there's a tendency about 2,500 to 3,000 years ago to transition in how we talk about the world. Now, in the Greek tradition, there's a sense in which they go from mythos, myth, which, for us today, when we hear myth, we say, oh, that's a story that's fake. That's not the way the ancients would have thought of the notion of a myth, okay, in any society. They would have thought of it as a myth, it's a narrative or story that explains something. It's not, and not necessarily literally, but it explains. Okay, it might not be literally true, but it's still true after a fashion. Okay, the ancients would say that across the board. But there's a transition from myth to logos. Okay, now this word logos gets translated as reason sometimes. It's where we get our word logic, but it's also where we get our word logo. So what's a logo?
Like,
Say that one more time. Yeah, a symbol, where it almost doesn't need an explanation. Like if you see the swoosh, what are we looking at? Yeah, like I don't have to go, I wonder what that means. Is that some kind of check mark? You know, when you see those golden arches, what are we looking at? I didn't even say the word. Okay? Something where, even if it doesn't have the word written on it, you see a red octagon, what are you supposed to do?
Stop.
Keep going. Okay, yeah, stop. Right, even if it doesn't have the word stop on it. Okay, it's not there. You know it with the red octagon, stop. That's what I'm supposed to do. Okay? So it's a logo, it's a symbol. We understand it in and of itself. So that's also what a logos is. It's something you know it when you see it. And it speaks for itself. Christians will later use this word to say this is God. And arche logos. In the beginning was the word, really that's the word there. Okay, the word for word. So it means word too, apparently. Okay, one of them. Reason, understanding, rationality. It's also all those ologies in all our sciences comes from this. So biology, bios, is one of the words for life. Okay, living things. What is biology? Reasoning about life. All right, so on. Now, what I'm saying is that in the ancient world, there's a transition from talking about things in terms of mere explanation. Here's what I mean by that. We're in the ancient world. We see a lightning bolt come down. Zeus is mad. Whew. I wonder why that happened. Okay, so there's an investigative nature here. Here, there's already an explanation, which is not necessarily wrong, but there's a tendency to just go immediately to an explanation that's in accordance with a grander narrative or story. We still do this, by the way. Okay, even in the scientific mindset, we have myths in place. But here, there's an inquisitive nature. I wonder why it did that. Why did that lightning strike? As opposed to just accepting an explanation. Now, to show you, we still do this. What's going to happen when I let go of this? You profits you. Now, why did it fall?
Because we've seen evidence of it.
True. All right. We got empirical evidence of what phenomenon? Downward demons. No. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Gravity, right? But if we're appealing to gravity, that's a myth that we kind of have in place, an explanatory story. That doesn't mean that it's fake, but we already have a big explanatory apparatus that we can appeal to. Okay, here we go. Yeah, but how does gravity work? The questioning nature here is what happens. So maybe, and it's not that saying I'm not saying gravity is false. Please don't let that be the takeaway from today. What if gravity's not real, yo? No. It's that we go from simply explaining to how does it work, though? How does it work? And this shift we see all over the world in the ancient, especially in the Taoist philosophy in China, Nyaya philosophy, in the Nyaya Sutras in India, and we also see it in ancient Greece. And that brings me to what the Greeks are concerned with. So that's the trajectory we're going to follow for a while. So basically we're going to watch the Greek world grow, kind of get assimilated by the Romans, and then that spread, and then see that come into contact with other belief systems and cultures as well. So let's follow that trajectory. The ancient Greeks are concerned with this question. What is let me go and say this now. If I write anything in the board in Greek or some other language, you do not have to memorize it. Okay? And you don't have to take a calligraphy class to figure it out. But I think it's important to recognize that most of the world is not written in English. The archy. Yes. The Greeks are concerned with the question of what is the archy? Some people say arche. I can look at that. The arche. What is the arche? What does that mean? Well, here's an English word that comes from this. Sometimes I'll do etymology for fun. Right, because I think it gets us thinking about things in my way. This word arche. What English words does it lend itself to? This one's the obvious one, arch. What's an arch do? We already talked about McDonald's. We already did it. Thank you. There it is. All right. Architect. They build arches? Sort of. Actually, yeah. But what does an arch do? Stuff. What's that?
Support.
It supports. Stuff rests on it. What do we call people that not dig up dinosaurs? Those are paleontologists. Literally, they talk about old, but people that dig up old people stuff. Archaeologists. What are they getting to the arches? No, they're getting to what is down there and has stuff resting on it. So we say, sometimes you might hear someone say, oh, that's very archaic. That's an old way of talking, an old way of speaking. Like everything rests on it. So the arche is, what does everything rest on? So literally they're asking the question, what is the universe made out of? The ancient Greeks. 2,600 years ago. Yeah, sure. Yeah, Mount Olympus, I got it. Okay, cool. Zeus, lightning bolts. Okay. Oh, look, Apollo. All that's, like, sure. And they'll say that very commonly. Just like an atheist can say, God bless you, when somebody sneezes. Okay. But the ancient Greek philosophers are wondering, sure, I don't want to be, I don't want to be considered non-religious. I'm still going to pray to Zeus, or Athena, or what have you. Yeah, great. What's the universe made out of? And so they start going from the mythological explanation to, again, logical explanation, trying to figure that out. Now, I'm going to go and tell you right now, we're going to look at some of their explanations, and we're going to go, that's ridiculous. But at least they're trying, okay? They're doing the best that they can. And we also have this tendency to do what C.S. Lewis once described as chronological snobbery, where he said this, in summary. We do this thing where we look back at the past and we're like, can you believe these idiots? Well, that's the way the future's going to look back on you, by the way. It's going to happen. The first ancient group of philosophers that we're going to talk about are the Milesians. They're called the Milesians because they're from a little town that today would be in Turkey, but the Anatolian Peninsula in the ancient world is like just East Greece. Today we think of it as Turkish. In the ancient world, it would have been considered just as Greek as Greece, Peloponnesus. And these early Greek philosophers have different claims about the archaic ones. Now, in fact, Thales here, our first Milesian. Before I get to what he believed the archaic was, he did something that was considered a big deal in the ancient world. Now, all the ancients, pretty much all the world over, from the Egyptians to the Greeks, the Indians, the Persians, to the Chinese, to people in the Americas as well, kept track of the stars. They had very accurate star charts. So they knew when things were going to happen. We can do this to this day. This is something that's gone on for quite some time. In fact, that's why it was one of the earliest scientific observations is how the stars move. Like you can pick a date right now, and you can figure out where Betelgeuse is going to be on October 22nd, 2046. You can look it up right now. The thing is, the ancients probably could have figured that out too. They would have had to do a little bit of, it would have taken them a little bit longer to figure it out, but they could have done it. But what Thales did that was important is that stars are easy. But he did something on May 28th, 585 BC. He predicted an eclipse. And here's why that's different from the stars. Stars are in the same place on the same day every year. Planets, on the other hand, are not. In fact, Aristotle makes this observation too. We'll talk about it again later. The more you zoom in the solar system to the Earth, the wackier things get. Okay, so the stars are in the same place all the time. Are the planets? They don't make any sense. Okay? Like, remember a couple of weeks ago, Jupiter and Saturn were right next to each other? Oh, and we're like, oh, they won't happen again for another 400 years. What are they doing up there? Okay? That's because we're moving around the sun and they're moving around the sun. Like if you, for example, what's the closest planet to Earth most of the time? And if you remember from elementary school, you're like, my very earnest, you remember that? So you're like, okay, right, here's the big yellow one, the sun. Okay, then Mercury, Venus, here we are, Earth, Mars. So we're in between Mars and Venus. So it's got to be one of those two, right? The planet that's closest to the Earth most of the time is Mercury. How? Because half the time, Mercury or Mars and Venus are on the other side of the sun. So Mercury, in virtue of being like just going around the sun, is closest to us most of the time. Okay. Well, we can figure that out. Just by observation. It sounds counterintuitive, but that's part of that logical reason. So it sounds like it shouldn't make sense, but it does because we can also demonstrate it with empirical evidence. But that just demonstrates that stuff closer to the Earth, the closer you get to the Earth, the wackier things get. Okay, the moon, what's it doing? Does it spin? Not because of tidal locking. No, it just looks at the Earth like an uncomfortable prom date. Okay, I'm looking at you. Okay. Now there's no dark side of the moon. It looks at the sun. It goes at the sun, but it's tidally locked, so the moon doesn't rotate. It just does this with us. Okay, that's why it always looks the same. It doesn't spin. Everything else spins in the solar system. Why isn't it spinning? Moon gods. Or whatever. Okay? And you get even further. And so that's why the ancient Greeks would call everything under the moon is the sublunar realm. You know, loony. Everything under the moon is crazy. Okay, the moon affects us and things. It does. It affects tides, right? Okay, look, moon, waves are going up. That's weird. Okay? Everything under the moon is just nuts. Doesn't make any sense. So, but he was able to figure out, okay, here's where the sun is, an eclipse is going to happen May 28th, 585 BC, at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. An eclipse is going to happen. Thales, the sky's going to turn black in the middle of the day. Okay. And then it did. He was like, money, please. And in fact, he would do things like this. He would apparently know, hey, son, the way the weather is, I think we're going to have a good olive crop this year. And he would make a bunch of money on that. He was the last philosopher to make a bunch of money. But apparently, I don't know how true this is, but apparently Thales died by looking up at the stars in wonder and falling into a ditch. Now, is that true? It can never be sure. Okay? But that's the way the story goes. Now, a lot of these ancient stuff, there's little anecdotes like that. Is it true? Is it not? Aristotle says so. Frankly, I don't know. And also, frankly, I don't care. But the other thing that he did was he was one of the first ones to answer this question. What's the arche? What's the universe made out of? And we're going to see that's almost like a drum roll for every ancient Greek philosopher. What's the universe made out of? You ready? You want to know? Water. Hydros. Everything's water? Really? Now, he's on to something. What are most of our bodies made out of? Uh-huh. What's most of planet Earth covered with? Okay. We even know today, based on atomic theory and modern chemistry, water is comprised of H2O, right? Hydrogen and oxygen are very basic elements. Hydrogen is, frankly, ubiquitous because of how tiny it is. It's atomic weight. There's a lot of hydrogen out there, so you might be onto something. And then he would say things like, What can't you live with? Even though you might be made, he wouldn't know what we're made of, our chemical composition. What happens if you don't drink it? You die. But also, you can also drown if you run into a bunch of this stuff. So it's that powerful. It can kill you, but you need it to live. Whoa. So and everything is ultimately fluid. Okay? Everything is water. Okay? And water is actually the most powerful thing out there. And he had even a kind of a knowledge of erosion, I think. Like what carved this? Water. Okay, we can watch it kind of happen over time. That kind of disappears for a while. It makes it come back in the 1700s. The notion of erosion carving things. Well, the universe is made of water. Cool. All right. Anybody up for that? Sign me up for Team Thales. The universe is water. Maybe he's just thirsty. I don't know. But he thinks that the universe is made of water. Now, unless you think that sounds ridiculous, now we might say, because we've been taught it, the universe is made of atoms. We know this. Okay, prove it. Show me an atom. No, that's pointing offensive definition. You say what something is like what's a lectern? Okay, good, cool. But that doesn't really show me an atom. Like you're actually assuming that the atoms are there. Look right here. There's a bunch of them. You show me one. And spoilers, you can't. And even if you could zoom in, like I could show you on an electron microscope. Yeah, how does that work? It's like, let me guess, smoke and mirrors. Yeah, no, but kind of, yeah. So even if you were to zoom in, you'd have to have a whole explanation for how the magnification works and that kind of stuff, so that ends up sounding sketchier. Here's the thing, by the way, atoms don't take up any... atoms are not physical things. Like if you could zoom in on a hydrogen atom, remember here's one electron. Remember when you look like the solar system model, right? Like, here's the blue ball, and the nucleus is a proton. And you got the yellow ball out there, it's the electron. It looks like a little tiny solar system, right? That's not what an atom looks like, because it doesn't look like anything. Even if you could like shrink down and see it, there'd be nothing to see, because all there is a negative charge and a positive charge. There's no show here. Neither are there photons bouncing off this other part. You wouldn't see it. There's nothing to see. There's a negative charge, positive charge. All right, so now atoms are invisible. Put them together. Whoa. They're invisible, but if you add them up, they're visible. Remarkable. How does that work? Atoms. Now, we all believe it because we've been taught it. Again, yes, it's true, it works. Okay, it's a good explanatory apparatus right now. But just don't do the thing where you're like, what idiots? Because obviously they don't have the same tools that we have today. But they're attempting to explain. And not merely resorting to myth. It's not that everything's Poseidon either. Okay. Next one of the bunch, the Milesians. Thales had a student. Anaximander here. This is probably going to zoom forward, and I don't know why. Frankly, I'll figure it out. He had a student, Anaximander. Now, Anaximander says, yes, this is great. Thales is brilliant. He's predicting eclipses. He thinks everything's made out of water. Here's the thing, though. Water's not a very good explanation for the universe, for everything in the universe. It's got to be something transcendent. Something above and beyond everything. And literally, he says, what the arche is. So here, Thales says, everything's water. Anaximander says, you know what it is? It's, he says the apeiron. It is boundless. So what he says is, it can't be something physical. Okay? It's something boundless, the apeiron. Yeah, I know it's moving on here, but like I said, the link is already up on Blackboard, so if you want to follow on your phone or your computer or something, it shouldn't make you go forward like that. So, apeiron. The boundless. It has to be something above and beyond. It can't be something in nature itself. There has to be more out there. As soon as you talk about it, you're not talking about it. It has to be something above and beyond, something beyond the limits of our understanding, something that explains the matter itself. Scientists work on this today. Like, okay, we got atoms, but what makes the atoms work? And that's why we have things like string theory or quantum gravity. Trying to like, all right, the stuff that's here, we got it, but how does that stuff work? And so you look at underlying principles. What underlies this? In fact, the Latin word for arche, the Latin word is principia. This is where we get our word principles. So like, what's the fundamental principle of the universe? What's the principia? The Romans will use that instead of this. Well, okay, Anaximander is onto something new and different. It can't be something in the universe, it has to be something beyond the universe. But that, literally, the word means apeiron, no fence. Apeiron is a fence, apeiron, no fence. It's boundless. There's no limits to it. It could be anything. Whoa. He has a student, Anaximenes, the last of our Milesians. And hearing all this about boundlessness, something above and beyond, all right, what could it be? Where does he go from here? The arche is? It's air. I thought we were going places with this. Evidently not. But what he does is he kind of does the same stuff Thales did. We know the universe is air. It's all around us. It's the one thing that can kill a fire. Get rid of air. Snuff it out. Also, what do you need to live? If you're not breathing, if you're not taking in air, that's when we know you're dead. It's not just when you stop drinking water. The instant. Okay. There's a sense in which, and the ancients think this too often, there's often this connection between breathing and living. Even in, like, say, the Hebrew tradition, God breathed life into Adam. And then, or when someone dies in the Hebrew tradition, they breathed their last. And now there'll be ashes. Okay? If the lungs stop working, you're dead. But, okay. And it gets more complicated than that. I just want to have, for our purposes, what I want you to know is when you think Thales, you should think water. When you hear Anaximander, you should think, Anaximander, air. No, don't think that way. Okay, it doesn't work. When you think Anaximander, you should think, he thought of the boundless. When you think of Anaximenes, you should think air. That's what I want you to know for our purposes. Okay, just be able to associate the arches. I'm not going to make it overcomplicated on this point. Because here we're just looking at the beginnings. There's really not too much going on here. They're trying. But they're getting it started, trying to explain things in a new way. And this is the way often science goes. In fact, the earliest scientists are called natural philosophers. For some reason. At least trying to get explained. This is often how scientific theories start, with some kind of hypothesis that might sound weird at the time. When Einstein said light bends and is influenced by gravity, it was literally laughed at. You're joking, right? And it wasn't until the Eddington experiment in 1919 where people were like, okay, I guess he's right, kind of, sort of, I guess. But there's definitely no gravitational waves. It's recently demonstrated in the last 5 years. Okay, but if someone will come along and say something as a scientific model, it will usually be laughed at. But sometimes someone will come along with a scientific model and say something, and it'll be laughed at because it is stupid. You don't know going into it if it's going to be the right answer or not, or an answer that works. We'll talk about that when we get to science. I'm just telling you that scientific explanations are the correct answer. It's not. They work. You can do stuff with it. All right, so this bunch. Milesians, first round. Okay, cool. But there's other schools of the Greeks. Let's talk about the Pythagoreans. They're also after the arche too. You've probably heard of Pythagoras. What have you heard of Pythagoras? What's math? Okay. Some of you look like you've been hurt by Pythagoras at some point. I know I was in about 10th grade. At Aiken High School, I don't want to talk about it. That's it, sure. And it does originate with him, because what does he think the arche is? He really thinks it's number. Notice I didn't say numbers. Because he's one of these guys. Did you know everything's math? Everything's math. Everything. Now, it's got some points. Look at what in this room is not look, every table in front of you is a rectangle. All the tiles on the ceiling, rectangles. But there's also circles up there, but occasionally there's a square. Okay, everything, circles, rectangles, triangles, they're everywhere. Look at something in the room that's not. Anything can be measured geometrically. Look, a line. So everything can be measured. Okay. Around us in the physical world. That's part of what the physical world is. It's measurable. So everything is mathematical in that sense. But also, numbers are great because they're concepts that are real, but they're not physical. Like this lectern. It's here, I can point to it, it's real, and I can do stuff with it. I can touch it. It's tactile. Numbers are real, but you can't touch them. But they're nevertheless real. But numbers are not, these are not numbers. What are they? These are symbols that represent numbers. Because I could just as easily do this, right? There's two different symbols of numerals. I'm really glad we don't have to do long division with these. Okay. How many times does V go into X? 2 i's. We use these. These are numerals. They stand for numbers. So what is 1? Well, you've never seen 1. You've seen, like here, 1 marker, but you're not looking at the 1, you're looking at the marker. Okay, it's not just an adjective, because other adjectives we can see them too, like that's red. It's green. I can see it. But if I say there's 1 marker, where's the 1? I can see the blueness. Okay, I can feel the hardness of it. Okay, I can feel the smut on it. Markers are next. But where's the oneness? Well, it's something real but transcendent. And so there are numbers everywhere. And some numbers are extra awesome than others. For example, he was really into triangles. Especially that one. And he liked the number 10, and he liked triangles. Well, especially this one. This is a triangular number. 10 is a triangular number because just bear with me. This is like the perfect triangle. You can stick 10 in it. They thought strange things, he thought things like odd numbers are masculine, even numbers are feminine, and that's why 5 is the number of marriage, because that's where feminine and masculine come together. Oh, okay. It's odd and even coming together to make something new. Now that we don't use. But he also developed the notion of square numbers. So stuff like this. Now here's a square. 4 sides in all directions. Square numbers we still use. This is not the scale. Square numbers we still use. Triangular numbers, you probably didn't need to know that. He's the one that developed that because everything is numeric. Now he's not doing the thing where he says this is the underlying language of the universe or something like that. Something that Neil deGrasse Tyson would say. Numbers are everywhere. No. It's merely that there's something about mathematics that shows us stuff about the world that it's not immediate and involves investigation to find it out. Like the stuff is already there. All it takes, mathematics is when we take our minds and figure things out that's already there. So what the universe primarily is number. Now, Pythagoras is he's not just a math teacher. Like he literally was part of the founder of a religion that worships the concept of number, as Aristotle tells us. And I think that actually is later. And he's not the only one. The Pythagoreans are a group that do this. And some other things. They believe that you have I think an Indian idea. And it's possible that Pythagoras spent time in India because the Indian mathematicians were developing, for example, these numerals. We call them Arabic numerals, but they actually come from India. They're developed later in the West. The reason why they're called Arabic numerals is they came from India by way of the Arabic world. But the Indian mathematicians were already doing this kind of stuff, so it's possible Pythagoras spent some time in India, or at least came into contact with some stuff from India, probably by way of the Persians. at the time in the ancient world. But this is going to have a particular effect on Plato as well when we get to Plato. In fact, it's like a great. Because everything really is number. But number actually shows us something about the world that you don't realize. That's going to be very instrumental for Plato when we get to him. The next bunch. Back up here. All right. Heraclitus. The next bunch are the Ephesians. Now, the Ephesians are from the Greek town of Ephesus. You might sound familiar. There's a New Testament epistle with that title. It's written to churches there many, many centuries later. But Ephesus, we've got Heraclitus. And he says, so the arcade really, he says it's fire, but he doesn't mean that literally. So he's not part of like, okay, we've done water, we've done air, surely fire gets a turn. He doesn't mean it like that. But he says the world is like fire. In what way? Well, he says it's like fire in that everything is, what's one fundamental feature about fire? Like water is not like this. Like, water can be destructive too, and so can fire. But water, can water be in motion? Sure, but have you ever seen water still? Yeah. Okay, now there's the difference. Have you ever seen fire in motion? Flickers, right? Have you ever seen flames be still? You got one of those fake fireplaces, you know what I mean? One of those just little orange lights that light up. Those fake candles people put in windows so your house doesn't burn down. Yeah, that stuff. Okay. Fire is constantly in motion. Constantly. It's in flux. So what Heraclitus says is when we look at the universe, what we see is this. He says this Greek expression, pantheia. Everything, literally, everything flows. But I think we can say everything is in flux. So Heraclitus says everything is in flux. Everything. It's like fire. So fire is constantly moving, the actual flames. While it's going, it's constantly in motion. You can't say, there it is, that's the fire. Like, that's the way it is. You can't just draw a picture of fire and be like, that's it. All fire looks like. Well, it could look kind of like that, but not exactly like that. Everything's constantly in motion. To the point where another way that he explains this is he says, and again, this is up on the slides too, but my slides are being very naughty today. You can't step into the same river twice. Immediately you might think, I beg to differ. Well, I know right now, I can, walk down to the Augusta Canal, go through some trees, and be like, Savannah River? Don't do it, it's dirty. I stepped in it twice. Yes, you stepped in the Savannah River twice, but are you in the same water you were in before? No, that water's already downstream. It's gone. You can't look at the moment and be like, here's the river. Like, here's this water right here. That water's gone. It'll be in the ocean in a couple of days. And so the universe is like that. And even we can talk about ourselves as contigenous personalities. What do I mean by that? All of you have a date of birth that we can look at and say, here's when I came into the world, and we can follow your trajectory in time. Right? No, I'm not going to do it. You can do it for yourself. Right? We know that. There's a contigenous unit of existence where you can say, I am this person, and here I am now. Well, I can do stuff like this. Are you the same person you were 10 years ago? And the answer to that question is yes and no. I can say, yeah, there's a contiguity and a continuity there, for sure. But no. I mean, most of you 10 years ago were kids, right? I was not. But we can still say, yeah, that's me, but that's also not me. Now, will you be the same person 10 years from now? Yes and no, assuming that you're still here. Fingers crossed. You'll still be you. But we can talk about us changing. Are you the same person you were yesterday? A year ago? 5 minutes ago? And really, the answer is no. Even in the last 10 seconds of me talking to you right now, the fact that you're reflecting on what's going on, and you're going, when is this class over? Okay, whatever's going on in your head, that interaction is a kind of fluctuation. So you are constantly in a state of moving. And keep in mind, the word motion doesn't mean, locomotion is where we move in space. Okay? Motion is any kind of change whatsoever. Of any kind. So for us, we're always in a state of motion, of fluctuating. And so Heraclitus takes this to even larger. Everything's constantly. Nothing is permanent. Everything changes. A long time ago, you didn't exist. And guess what? In the future, you will not exist. I mean, it's looking good for you right now. Everything gets pulverized. Everything changes. Nothing is permanent. Even you can try to build the greatest foundation, whatever you want. Everything's fragile, everything's breakable. It's like he's previewing the second law of thermodynamics. Much to the chagrin of some other Greeks. But the idea here is, how can we know? Now he's getting at a question, how do we know anything if everything changes? How can we know anything if everything changes all the time? Okay, Pythagoras, numbers look pretty constant. That's good. You got that going for you. Okay, how can we really answer the question what something is ever? Because it changes. If I ask for a definition of what are you, or who are you? Are you who you are right now? Like, is this it? Is it the ideal version of you? Like who I'd like to be? Who I will be in 10 years? Who I was 10 years ago? Which version of you is the real you? Now, how do you answer that question? Heraclitus says we really can't. And he says, in spite of all this fluctuation, it seems like we can know things. Now, it seems like, even if you haven't seen somebody in like 5 years, like you see somebody you haven't seen in a long time, I've had that experience today, coming back on campus. I haven't seen you in a year. Now, I can still go, I don't go full Heraclitean and say, everybody's a stranger to me today. I've never met anyone before because everything changes all the time. Okay. Who are you? Well, we've met before. Oh, no, we haven't because everything's in flux. Riverman. No. Heraclitus says there is something that kind of undergirds this, that even though everything's constantly fluctuating, there is a principle that makes things work, that lets us recognize things in spite of their fluctuations. And he says here's that word again. It's the logos. There is this principle that in spite of all the fluctuations in the world, there's something out there. Now that's not his argument. He says that in spite of the fact that everything fluctuates or changes, in spite of that, there's something that still maintains a constancy somehow. I don't know how it works, but it does, says Heraclitus. But so the thing I want you to know about Heraclitus, all right, everything's in flux. Can't step in the same river twice. But for him, everything is constant. Everything is constantly in motion. Everything is constantly changing. There is nothing permanent. Ever. Everything comes into being and out of being all the time. There's constant motion going on. Now, much to the chagrin of the next group. So the next group of Presocratics that are like, here's where you're wrong, Heraclitus, are the Eleatics. Well, take a brief glimpse. There they are. The Eleatics. I'm going to plow on through. Two main ones, Parmenides. Wrong. Parmenides. And Zeno. Our first Zeno. We'll have another Zeno later on. Zeno and Elia. And they're Eleatics because they're from Elia. And basically they are the anti-Ephesians. The anti-Heraclitus. If Heraclitus said it, it's wrong. And what did Heraclitus say? Everything changes. Wrong. What did Parmenides and Zeno say? Nothing changes. Parmenides. It's in my hand here. It's in motion. And it's moving. It's changing right now. And what Parmenides would say is, no, it isn't. This is just stupid talk. Hear him out. This, what you look around and what you see, isn't it. That is, all your senses, what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, what you touch, they have nothing to do with reason and logic and thinking. They're stupid. You ever seen something that wasn't there? You ever heard something that wasn't there? What's that? Smelled something? You ever had a dream where you wake up and you thought it was real at first? Even for half a second? And then you're like, oh, that wasn't real. But I saw it. But you weren't using your eyeballs, were you? Not in your dream, you weren't. I smelled something in my dream. You weren't using your nose. You saw something in your dream, you weren't using your eyes. The sensory stuff is irrational. It's illusory. So, don't trust it. Reality is actually something that is out there. I don't mean like out like in space. There is a reality. What you're seeing isn't it. But we can tap into reality with our minds. With stuff like logic and mathematics gets us an actual reality. Now, he's not a Pythagorean. Remember Pythagoras? Oh, yay, we get to worship triangles again? No, not that. But that we can find things out that are real, even if they don't exist in reality. Now, like in mathematics, consider this. And I think this is kind of what he's getting at to some degree. We can talk about, when I say the word circle, you know what I mean. Shape, right? Can anybody draw one? A perfect circle? Ain't it? It's not happening. Even if you zoom, even if you, you ever zoomed into an image like in paint, you ever zoomed into like an image real close and all, but even if it looks perfectly round, you get in there and you see these little pixels. You ever put your face way too close to a television? That was my childhood, and I turned out fine, Mom. Those little green, red, blue dots. There they are. Okay. So that means circles don't exist. Here we are. Find me one that's actually perfect. You're not going to find one. If you zoom, you will get, even if you go down to an atomic, subatomic level, well, now there's not even stuff there anymore to measure, right? Because it's just those negative and positive charges. It doesn't exist. But we can talk about the concept of a circle and know exactly what I'm talking about and know what the definition is. The circles are real, but they don't exist in the world. Right? They're an ideal that we can say, yeah, that kind of fits the definition of what the concept is, but it's not really there. Same thing. All right, so something like that. So that's what Parmenides uses against. Reality is something higher than what we see around us. This is something, what we're seeing with our senses, what we're experiencing with our senses. But there's that reality itself is Tohen, the one. Not the number one, just this oneness itself. There's just the one, there's just reality into it of itself. And this is not it. I don't know what this is. I think the Wachowskis are really into the concept of Parmenides. That is the Matrix. Is this real? This isn't the real world. Well, that's kind of what's going on here. Not quite. When you get to Buddha, Buddha's going to agree to some extent. Yeah, you're right, this isn't it. But there is no it at all. Also, there's no you. We'll get to that when we get to Buddha. And also, it's things like this. There's only reality itself. There's no such thing as nothing. Because as soon as you start talking about nothing, now you're talking about something. So nothing doesn't exist. So you're like, all right, if I say picture nothing, imagine nothing. You can't do it. If you're like, no, I can't. I'm thinking of nothing right now. I've been doing that since 140. But if you're like, oh no, even if we talk about nothing, we're talking about something because we got a word there. So he's like, nothing doesn't exist. All right, so that's the kind of game that Parmenides would play. I can think of nothing. Watch me say nothing. But you said something in order to say that nothing, so you just... Congratulations. You played yourself. What else you get from Parmenides? The arche is the one. The universe itself is singular. Change is actually an illusion. Because it's taking place. Anything physical is obviously illusory and elusive. It's not real. And you might be saying, well, I can see it happening. How can you tell me what I'm seeing right now is not real? And all he has to do is say, you've seen stuff that's not real before? You ever seen a mirage on a hot day? I know I have. South Carolina, Georgia streets, could be 100 feet away. I've never thought it was an oasis, like they do in cartoons. But I was thinking, why is the world all bendy? Is it really all bendy like that? Well, that's just the way it appears. Well, but also the room, the way it is right now, is how it appears. So appearances, as it can be deceiving, they intrinsically are. Now, the Robin to Parmenides' Batman is Zeno. And Zeno seeks to use math to show you how stupid you are for trusting your senses. So watch him demonstrate to you with math. I love these. These paradoxes, now they're meant to be not really logical illusions, but they're ways that Zeno tries to show you that change is not real. So you might be thinking, look, like Zeno does this one, the Achilles and the tortoise. He'll say this, using math, I can prove to you that I did not just walk around across the room. I just saw it. It's on camera. Zeno, allow me. Let us assume, for the sake of argument, that I went 10 feet. Okay, we'll say this distance is 10 feet. Obviously, he's not using imperial measurements, okay? Because they didn't exist yet. All right, so I want you to see if you can find the problem here. All right, so he said, okay, you saw me walk 10 feet. I will now show you with math that I did not walk 10 feet. In order to have gone 10 feet, I must have gone 5 feet, right? And he does the example he uses is, he says, imagine there's a tortoise here, and Achilles is over here, and Achilles is trying to catch up to him. Will he ever do it? And the answer is no, but I think this is a little bit simpler because it gets to the idea across. In order to go 10 feet, I first have to go 5 feet. Okay? In order to go 5 feet, I have to go 2.5 feet, right? And in order to go 2.5 feet, I have to do half of that, and half of that, and half of that, and half of that, and half of that. On to infinity. Right? But if it's on to infinity, how could I have gone how could there be infinite points of distance here? How could I have gone 10 feet if there's infinite space in here? Math! Prove me wrong, says Zeno. By the way, the answer is you can't have an infinite series of points in a finite series. Okay? Right, you don't need to know that. That's not going to be this question. But the point is he's at least trying to reason with you. You're showing, I can mathematically show you that in order to do this much, I'd have to go do this, and then this, and then this. And if you break it down, it actually doesn't look like it's possible. You might have seen it happen, but mathematically it's impossible. And the other one, I don't want you to think about this one too hard, but the paradox of the arrow. So you see the example of saying, you've seen like an archer shoot an arrow before. No, you haven't. So, yeah, but you can watch an arrow move. Like, here it is. Okay, knocked in the bow, and there it is in the target, in the bullseye. And you can watch it go through the air. Aha! The arrow only is wherever it is and not someplace else. You might think that the arrow is going through the air, but the arrow only is where it is. It doesn't invade some other... Now, if you're like, wait a minute, no, here it is, going through the air. Yeah, but it is where it is, it's not someplace else. It's not just going to magically appear over there. Motion is a lie. Now, this tension is important. Because the Greeks are trying to figure out here now, and basically these become the two teams that Plato is going to reconcile. That's why Plato's pretty important. Plato's going to say, Heraclitus, Parmenides, and Zeno, you're both right, and you're both wrong. So that's why Plato, when we get to him, is going to be such a big deal, because he's going to say, to preview it just a little bit, Plato's going to say, this place is an illusion, but there is a reality where everything is permanent and fixed and nothing changes. And this ain't it. So he says, you're both right, but you're describing two different universes or cosmoses. All right. A couple more of these guys. Well, the only takeaway that I want you to know with the pluralists is that, and there are more than these. These names that I'm using here are just the big names. I don't even like that. There's so many, all these groups that I'm talking about are really communities, but for an intro class I can build this point to these. Anaxagoras and Empedocles. All right. Thales, water. Anaximenes, air. Heraclitus, fire. What's next, earth? Come on. It's a bunch of stuff, obviously. Different things coming together. Different stuffs. But what puts it together is this stuff called, let's see how long. Yeah. Nous. Which in English almost all the time is translated as mind. Nous. And what the pluralists say is that there's a bunch of just different stuff out there that comes together and falls apart. But it's not just, things come together, things fall apart, and there's a bunch of different things. That's why they're pluralists. And they have different ways of describing this that you don't really need to know. I just want you to know who the pluralists are. We'll just go with that. Anaxagoras and Empedocles for our purposes. Like for Anaxagoras, it's syncresis, like synchronous, like this is a synchronous class. Okay. Things coming together, falling apart, but nous, or mind, is directing it. There is an intelligence out there, a mind, that's bringing things together. Now, lest you think, so there's like a God out there? Mm-mm. This is not someone who loves you and has a plan for your life. Okay, there's just some intelligence organizing these things. Because if anything's organized, there has to be some mind behind it. So say the Greeks. That's a tendency that keeps going for a while. And we see this in both Anaxagoras and Empedocles. And Empedocles has different ways of describing it. It's not aggregation and disruption. It's these concepts of love and strife. Now, he doesn't mean love there like if we all just come together, the world will be a new place. No. He means like love, like we talk about magnets being attracted to each other. It's not like one pole looks at the other and, hey, you sexy magnet. It's not what's going on. All right, they're attracted in terms of in a physical way like that. Things just come to, some things are drawn to each other, some elements of nature are drawn to each other, and some are repelled by each other. But also, there's still this notion of mind putting these things together. We're going to see that trajectory continue for a while, and then in the Greek world. And then the Jews, the Christians, and Muslims are going to love that. Okay, there's a mind out there putting things together? I got a name for it. God. Now, it's not like they invent that. It syncs up with the views that they already have. And it does pretty well. We'll see that when we get there. That'll be a couple weeks. So, what I'm going to do next time is I'm going to continue this, but then we're going to move on to talking about Socrates, or Socrates. And what we're going to look at out of the book is this piece called Euthyphro. In the context, it is on page, if you've got it, it's on page 18. But I'll also have a PDF probably up on Blackboard.